Hi everybody, today I'm looking at the Olympus OM1, which was initially released in 1972 and then it was actually called an M1, but Leica had the M series of cameras available then, so they complained and made Olympus change it to the OM1 in 1973, and then it became the OM-1MD in 1974. And the difference there was they incorporated the motor drive functions on the base plate contacts, etc. And then again it changed in 1979 to the last version of the OM1, which is this OM-1n, and that included further improvements, including auto flash sync with T-series flashes if you fit a hot shoe 4. Regardless of how you got the switch set, and also a LED ready light in the viewfinder, and another thing was contacts for a different data back that they put into the back of the camera as well. So that's just a few. So there's quite a few different improvements. Apparently they improved the redesigned the film advance as well, but I've just mentioned the major ones. So I'm going to go through all its controls and features, and you've got to remember this camera was actually released, say, in the 70s, early 70s, and at that time Nikon had their f2 camera out, which is this. I can get it all in shot actually with the OM1, and it just shows you the difference between a Nikon f2 and an Olympus OM1. Now obviously there are a lot of differences between them, but this was Olympus's professional camera. It does lack some of the features of the f2 as regards a interchangeable viewfinder, but it does have interchangeable focusing screens. But that was Olympus's design actually to create a very more compact but reliable and very featured camera. So that's the difference between an f2. Now also around that time Nikon released their compact series of cameras, and this was the FM, and again still the Olympus OM1 is smaller than the FM as well. So it was much appreciated for its compactness, but still having a lot of features and being a professional, well-made camera, sturdy camera. So I'm going to go just mention its features, etc. Go over its controls. Looking at the top plate, you've got the film advance and shutter cocking lever. It's got a standoff position. It's a bit flimsy on this one. I'm not sure if that's a standard thing of them all, but it just feels very soft at that point. But it's got a nice stroke on it. That's the full stroke. That's got the shutter, and the shutter release button is here. It's got a threaded insert for a cable release, and the shutter and the exposure is all manual on this camera. You set the shutter speed, you set the aperture against a matched needle exposure meter, and that is what you see through the viewfinder. On the left hand side there's a needle. Now that uses a battery which fits in the bottom here, and it uses a standard then PX625 Mercury 1.35 volt battery, but you can fit 1.5 volt alkaline equivalents now, but obviously it will put the meter off, so you can have it recalibrated, or you can buy adapters that reduce the voltage down to 1.35 volts, which is what I've done. So that cocks the shutter, and I say it's all manual control. You set the shutter speed and the aperture yourself, and a thing that Olympus did on this camera, which was different to a lot of other cameras available at the time, rather than put the shutter speed control on the top plate, they put it around the lens mount, which is here, and you adjust it by holding onto these little grips at the side, and you've got shutter speed controls right from B, which is for bulb, so the shutter remains open. I press the shutter button, it remains open until you release it, and then you've got your timed settings of from 1 second up to 1/1000th of a second. And I say it's a mechanical, fully mechanical camera. If you didn't have a battery, the only thing that wouldn't work is the meter. So 1 second, I just let you know what it sounds like. It's very nice mechanical sound. Lovely sounding cameras. I love all mechanical cameras. I just like the sound of them, the feel of them. So that's your shutter speed ring, which they put around the mount rather than on the top plate, because the top plate here is occupied by the ASA film speed dial. It's got a long range. It goes from 25 all the way up to 1600, and you adjust that by this little button here. You just press that in, and then you can adjust the ASA speed dial, and you set it against a little, you just see a little mark on the shutter speed ring, and you just set the film speed against that for the correct film speed in use. Moving across, you've got a hot shoe contact for fitting a shoe, because it doesn't come with a shoe as standard, and I think that's a nice feature of this camera, because without that fitted and a flash fitted, it looks very sleek, and it reminds me of the Nikon F camera with a triangular pyramid shape prism. But you can buy hot shoes for them, and for the OM-1n they say you should use the hot shoe 4, which is this one, which gives you the auto flash sync with the T series of flashes, and that just simply fits. You've got 2 contacts here and a mounting screw, and it just fits onto the top there and screws on. But you do find with some of the flashes a bit top heavy compared to the camera, because with the camera being so small, something like the T20 flash, quite big, and when you put batteries in it's heavy as well, and these tend to crack because they get a lot of stress on them. But in general I find I won't use a flash anyway, so it doesn't really bother me. I like using it as it is. Moving across, you've got a on-off switch, and all that does is switch the meter on or off. And if you have it on the on position, the meter is being used all the time, but obviously if you keep the lens cap on, it will make the meter basically inactive because it's not receiving any light. It uses 2 CDS cells which are inside the prism for metering, and it's center weighted. I'm not sure of the ratio, but it does give you a center weighted metering. So you switch that on, and as I mentioned, you look through the viewfinder, there's a needle in the bottom left which you won't see. What I try and do, you might be able to just see it down there in the centre now of the screen. You can just see the centre of the where the needle will be, and obviously you adjust the aperture or the shutter speed depending on what type of photo you have to create in. You adjust those until the needle is in the middle of those 2 prongs, which you can just see there, and that is deemed as the correct exposure for a standard exposure meter reading, obviously. And if it's above, the needle is above, it's overexposing, and if it's below, it's underexposing. But you can adjust it accordingly, obviously depending on your requirements. Another different thing about the Olympus lenses which they did, a lot of them, the Olympus lens, have the aperture setting on the front of the lens rather than around the base, but although some of them do, and a lot of the third party ones have the aperture on the base as well. So you've got the aperture here. This is fitted with a 50mm f1.4, and again, because the size of the camera, it does seem compact when you compare it to a Nikon f1.4. You can see the difference in size, which is the equivalent lens on the Nikon. Supposed to be very good quality lenses, always known for sharpness and good quality. This is an early 50mm as well, because because I want to match the camera. It's got what you call a silver nosed lens. We can see all the colouring in it. It's got nice colouring inside the lens, and so that would be a standard lens I would use. I've also got a 35mm maximum aperture f2 lens, which is something I would use for general photography. So you've got the focusing on the lens, and for me I find it a little bit strange because it focuses completely different to a Nikon. You move it the opposite way, but obviously that's something you just get used to. Moving over again on the top plate, you've got it looks oversized actually, the rewind crank and lever because of the size of the camera, but they made it nice size just to give you a nice grip still rather than make it small and flimsy, and it feels ever so nice as well. And to open the back, you use this knob just to pull it up and it flicks the back open. Now they use the shutter is a horizontally travelling cloth focal plane shutter, which it works basically. I'm not sure how reliable it is, but you've got say on this model, the later end model, you've got the contact here for I believe it's for a data back. Another nice thing about these cameras, when you look through the viewfinder, you're quite surprised because the camera is so small. I don't know if I can see that. Probably don't look that much different actually to the FM, but the viewfinder looks so small, but when you actually put your eye to it, with the magnification of the viewfinder inside, it's quite surprising how big a view you get. I think it's something like a 0.95 magnification, and the viewfinder, by the way, gives you 97% of what you're going to actually get on the film, so that's nice. So moving around to the front, you've got a little switch here for when you want to rewind the film at the end, and you just flick that over to the R, and then it releases the sprocket and you can rewind the film with the crank. You've also got a self timer, and on this what you do is you can move the self timer. Apparently you can set it to different settings. You can set it nearly halfway around and then fully way around. I think it's about 9 to 10 seconds delay. And to trigger the self timer, once you've got the shutter, you use this little switch here, which sets the self timer going. And I say this is an SLR, remember, it's not mirrorless, and so the mirror has to flick up as well, obviously. I'll just show you the inside with the lens off, and the Olympus lenses, you remove them with this little catch here. You press that in and turn anti-clockwise. That's the mirror, which looks quite oversized actually because of the size of the camera. You've got interchangeable focusing screens. There's quite a lot available. This, I believe, is the standard one with a split image in the centre. So quite a simple mount actually. To put the lens back on, you align the red dot with the red dot and just turn clockwise. Also on the lenses you have a depth of field preview button, because obviously it works at full aperture when you meter in. So if you press that control, it closes the lens down to the working aperture. You can see the aperture blades moving inside the lens there. Also on the front you have a mirror lock up, which was a feature of this camera which they didn't pass over to the later cameras like the OM2 and OM3, OM4. This one actually has a mirror lock up feature, which is this control here, and basically you just flick it anti-clockwise, turn it, you can see it puts the mirror up, and you can use it like that for as long as you want. It stays up until you manually put it down again with this control. It flips it down. Let's put the lens back on again. Moving across, you've got a flash sync socket, PC sync socket for a flash, and you've got an adjustment to use either electric flashers or flash bulbs with a control here. But say this later model, when you fit the hot shoe, it automatically sets that feature and syncs the flash for you. So just looking at the bottom, so I think that's to tell you there. You've got a tripod socket, obviously, the motor drive cover and the battery cover. So there you go, that's a nice look at the Olympus OM1. Lovely camera. I intend putting a film in it soon and taking it out. The meter seems quite accurate with the battery I've got fitted. That's got the reduced voltage in. So there you go, hope you've enjoyed this video, and I hope to see you again soon. Thanks for watching.